What are you hoping to accomplish out of your writing? Is it you want to go full time? Is it you want to get your books out into the world? There's all sorts of different goals out there. But do you have a goal that's within your control? Because if your goal is a sales goal, that I think is problematic. And that's where a lot of people kind of go wrong. There has to be more to it than just sales. Sales is an important part, but you can't control your sales. So what can you control?
Hello, fellow creative voyagers. This week on the Indie Author Podcast, I talk with Michael Ronn about getting unstuck in book marketing and promotion, including how authors can get unstuck when traditional methods like ads and blogger reviews are not affordable or effective. Michael emphasizes the importance of having an email list and a reader magnet, using strategic pricing, updating book descriptions, and optimizing back matter. We also discuss leveraging relationships with other authors for cross-promotion and the potential of using Kickstarter. We highlight various low-cost and free resources while underscoring the significance of setting realistic expectations and being persistent. And thanks to the Storyverse for suggesting this topic in my private Indie Author Crew Facebook group. And now let's hear from Michael Ronn about getting unstuck in book marketing and promotion. Hello, and welcome to the Indie Author Podcast. Today, my guest is Michael Ronn. Hey, Michael, how are you doing?
Great, Matty. Always great to be back with you.
Always lovely to have you here, and especially when someone is a return guest. As often as you have been, it seems silly to just keep reading your bio. So I'm going to ask you the new standard repeat guest question, which is, what is a fact about you that my listeners and viewers might not know?
Okay, so it took me a really long time to think about this, but I used to be super fluent in Spanish. So I speak Spanish. I am fluent. My Spanish isn't as good as it used to be. I had a job where I spoke Spanish all day, every day. And so I got really good at speaking Spanish, and to the point where I could think in Spanish and I could have lots of really advanced conversations. And then I left that job and then I started to lose it. And so now I'm kind of fair to middling, fair to partly cloudy in my Spanish skills. But yeah, that's something you probably wouldn't know about me by looking at me. But I went to school for a degree in English and Spanish. So I was an English major, but I was also a Spanish major too. So it's a fun fact about me.
I'm going to steal a question that otherwise you could have used for our next one, which is, where did you go to school?
I went to a little college in Iowa called Simpson College.
Okay.
Yep. So just outside of Des Moines. It's about 30 minutes outside of Des Moines.
Have you heard of Cornell College?
I have, yes.
My sister went to Cornell College, and she went on to teach at Oxford University. So good things can happen to people who go to small liberal arts colleges in Iowa.
This is true. I actually, it's funny, long story. Simpson was like on my top, it was my top school, but Cornell was like number 3, maybe 4. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah. It's a small world. So I also have to ask, have you ever thought about putting out translating a work into Spanish yourself?
No. I'm not that good.
Yeah. But at least if you had somebody else translate it for you, you'd probably have a better shot at making an assessment about whether the translation was good or not than other authors might.
I could. I mean, my wife is Latina, so she can look at it and say, hey, is it good? Is it not good? But yeah, I'm more focused on English, and translations is just such a difficult side of the business that I'm probably going to engage in it only when I'm really, really ready.
Yeah, that's something that I've also put off. It's there on the list somewhere, but it's not nearing the top yet. So, Michael, I invited you back to the podcast because I got a question from one of my listeners on Facebook. And I'm just going to read the whole question, the whole dilemma, and then we'll dive into the conversation. But this is from Storyverse. I think I'm saying that correctly. And Storyverse says, I would love to hear about how to get unstuck when it feels like nothing is working. I know I need to get my books out to people, but I can't afford ads right now. So what do I do instead? I also can't seem to find a lot of bloggers who work with indie authors. I know they were out there because people talk about them, but my search is coming up empty or with bloggers who are not accepting new books. I recently asked an indie author group how to solve this blogger review problem, and the comments were not to worry about getting reviews because they don't actually help. I keep getting conflicting information on the topic of reviews. So I'm feeling stuck because I can't run ads and I can't find bloggers, and getting reviews doesn't help, and I'm not sure what to do. I'm working on my next book, so that will hopefully come out in 2025, and I do have a small email list and reader magnet, but I keep feeling like if I can't figure this out for the first 3 books, then how am I going to figure it out for my next book? I would love information on getting unstuck. And so I saw this question, I thought, yeah, this is the problem of pretty much every indie author out there. And so I thought it would lend itself to a great conversation. And when I thought about who do I want to have this conversation with, I thought, I know, Michael. So I wanted to start out, actually kind of as an aside, I want to start out with the happy news of this, which is that Storyverse does have an email list and a reader magnet. So I think that's great. That's a great foundational asset to have. Michael, do you just want to have any comments about the fact that there is an email list and a reader magnet in play here?
Yeah, that's a good start. It's kind of a prerequisite for having any level of success, right? So, yeah, a newsletter and a reader magnet is good. Now, I would presume that by having a newsletter and a reader magnet, that you have a website. So that's another positive that will be an important part in your author strategy. So, no, doing the right things for sure on that front.
Yeah, and I have the feeling that in the process of this conversation, I'm going to be able to reference a lot of resources that are available out there on the Indie Author podcast already. And so the one that I'm seeing right away is episode 252, which is Strategic Website Planning for Authors with Pauline Weil. So if folks don't have a website yet, then Pauline has a lot of great information on how to get that set up. So I think one of the pieces of advice is don't undervalue the things you already have, which in this case are the email and a reader magnet to lead people to the email. I mean, one thing that Storyverse might be able to do is sort of lean into really making sure that the list, regardless of how big or small it is optimized, look for ideas. I know I'm starting to see more recently about how people can move beyond the short story to other ideas for reader magnets. So make sure you're making the most use you can of the resources you have, as well as looking forward to things that you want to expand to.
Yeah, absolutely. And if your reader magnet, that's one of the tougher parts about having a reader magnet when you start, is that when you start your career, it's kind of difficult to build a reader magnet because what do you send people to? Is it a short story? Is it a character interview? That sort of thing. And the more books you have, the more options you begin to get for your reader magnet. Because if you've only got one book, well, you can't give away a book, right?
Right.
If you've only got two books, it probably still doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But once you have more books, then you can start to, I think the most effective reader magnet is giving away a full book or at least a novella. So maybe that's not something Storyverse has or can do right now, and that's totally fine. But it's just something to think about, because you mentioned optimizing your reader magnet, having a long-term strategy of what that actually looks like, I think is also important and will, again, not going to solve your problems today, but will be a good long-term solution.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that also prequels to books can be a good reader magnet, and that can not only be profitable as a reader magnet, but can also be fun because it helps you sort of think through and make more concrete the characters that you're working with. So it can be a good writing exercise, a good craft exercise, as well as a good marketing exercise as well.
Yeah, agree.
So one of the things that popped into my head right away is that Storyverse says how to get unstuck when it feels like nothing is working. And I think the first question to ask is, what is the criteria for nothing is working? Michael, I know you have some thoughts about this. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, it comes down to expectations. I talk to a lot of people that say nothing is working. Well, what does that mean? Does it mean you have $0 in royalties every month? Does it mean you've set a goal for yourself and you're not hitting that goal? There's all sorts of things that nothing is working could mean, right? And so I think what I always come back to and what worked for me when I was in the beginning of my career is really focusing on what is my goal and what is in my control. Because this can be an expensive path, right? It's not cheap to produce a book, let alone 100 books. It's an expensive endeavor. But what is your goal? What are you hoping to accomplish out of your writing? Is it you want to go full time? Is it you want to get your books out into the world? There's all sorts of different goals out there. But do you have a goal that's within your control? Because if your goal is a sales goal, that I think is problematic. And that's where a lot of people kind of go wrong. There has to be more to it than just sales. Sales is an important part, but you can't control your sales. So what can you control? Well, you can control your productivity. You can control the relationships you own with other authors and readers. You can control your website. You can control what you're doing from a marketing perspective. Even if you don't have a whole lot of money, there are lots of low cost and free marketing tools that we can talk about in the show today. But focus on what's in your control, and your goal should really be focused around that.
Yeah.
That's my initial thought.
That's bringing up another great tie into another episode. So very shortly before this episode, I talked with Dre Baldwin about goal setting for authors. That was episode 269. So that would be a good resource for people. And I do think that it's so easy to undervalue what we're achieving. I mean, this is just going back to what you were saying about nothing is working, that I've spoken to people who have, we're talking about a mailing list, and they'll say, I only have 10 people on my mailing list. And I've also spoken to people that say, I only have 1,000 people on my mailing list. And I'm like, I'm sure that when those people get to 10,000, they're going to say, I only have 10,000 people on my mailing list. And so it's so easy to undervalue what we actually have achieved. So hopefully that, that's like a bit of a happy perspective on the is nothing really working, but maybe nothing is. I mean, maybe in terms of sales, and I think that this is probably behind a lot of the question that Storyverse has posed, that sales, I'm suspecting, is part of what is driving the feeling that nothing is working. And so I wanted to divide our conversation. I think that the questions were basically focused around marketing and promotion. And so I'm going to go back to the ally definitions of marketing and promotion, which are: marketing is how you let people know about you and your books. It's what branding would be a part of. It's things like your mailing list, your website, those things that are foundational and ongoing over time. And then promotion being those time-bound events like a book discount or something like that is specifically aimed at pushing sales. So one of the comments that Storyverse makes is, I can't seem to find a lot of bloggers who work with indie authors. So I think that she's talking about bloggers as reviewers, and we can get into some more detail. I think some other interpretations of this is authors who can post to other blogs, like people who host a blog and solicit guest posts. I don't think this is what she's talking about, but I thought since this would be a possible marketing approach, maybe we could talk about that as well. Do you think that those opportunities to be a guest blogger are worth pursuing?
Not as a guest blogger. I think that time has long passed. I think it was maybe true somewhat 10 years ago where you could pitch different blogs to feature your book. And there is still that culture out there, but I can't think of the last time I read someone's blog. That's just not where people are. It's not really where a lot of readers are finding books, at least in a lot of genres. It's true in some, right? And if that is the culture of your subgenre, then go for it. But I just don't think that's how people are finding books anymore. And it's a numbers game. It's a very difficult thing to pitch a blogger. Some bloggers don't take self-published authors. Other bloggers have more pitches than they know what to do with. And so you're really just kind of screaming into a void. I think that there are better, more productive uses of your time as an author with your marketing.
Yeah, I think that assuming that the question here was really around bloggers who are reviewing books, and I think this is really genre specific and situationally specific and blogger specific. So as an example, a great episode to listen to about this is episode 169, which is the do's and don'ts of working with book bloggers with Christopher Zgorski. And Christopher is the person behind Bolo Books, which is a very well-known independent book review platform in the crime fiction community. And so a crime fiction writer who could get Christopher to review their book, I think it would really benefit from that. But I know if you listen to that episode, you can hear all the challenges that book reviewers like Christopher face, like getting hundreds of requests for placement when he can only read one book at a time. And also because he is Bolo Books, be on the lookout for, he only reviews books before publication. And so that can be more or less workable depending on an indie author's particular publication schedule. If you don't want to wait months after the book is done in order to get it reviewed by advance reviewers who only publish a review in advance of the launch, then this may not work out for you. But I do think it's much more logistically challenging. Of course, if you go to a blogger who has a faithful audience and you can get a good review from them, that can be a great boost. And so it might be worth adjusting your schedule or factoring that in when you're planning for a launch, and understanding who the people are in your genre and in your space who have that kind of following and will make it worth your while.
Yeah. And if that's a viable path, you've got to have a really good pitch. And so learning copywriting is a very, very valuable skill. It's a valuable skill for every author to learn, but it becomes immensely important when you're pitching book bloggers because there's no guarantee that they're going to read your pitch. And if they do read your pitch, it's got to sell your book and it's got to be concise and very snappy. So if you're going to go that route, as you pointed out, Matty, I think there are a lot of problems with it. It wouldn't be the center point of my strategy, though. It would be something that I would do, but I wouldn't be resting my entire strategy on book bloggers.
Yeah. One tip that Christopher offered in that episode that I thought was interesting is that he's doing this as a labor of love. He can only read one book at a time. And when he's going through his big virtual pile of books, picking what he's going to read next, he as any human being would be, stops at the ones where he recognizes the name. And oftentimes he recognizes the names because there are people who follow him and interact supportively with him on social media or have dropped him a note saying that they especially appreciated a review. So if it is something you want to do, then paving the way to that interaction being a productive one, not only with the effective pitch letter, but with forming a relationship even before you pitch the person, I think is a really good idea. So bloggers who do reviews is one thing that Storyverse asked about. But then there was this larger question of, I keep getting conflicting information on the topic of reviews. The comments were not to worry about getting reviews because they don't actually help. So I got to say, I completely disagree with with whoever's giving that advice. Michael, thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think getting reviews is immensely important, especially those early reviews of your book. So the more reviews you can get, the better. But certainly you want to try to get as many as you can. And using your existing audience, using your newsletter, letting people know that review copies are available. There are very, very low-cost services out there to help you connect with potential reviewers, Book Sirens, Booksprout, Hidden Gems. These very, very low cost. I mean, you're not going to spend a whole lot of money on these sites. I mean, they're essentially, you're able to post your book, and then it's kind of like a pitch. Right? You post your book and your cover and a description of the book and who it's for and all that stuff. And readers can find it. And if they are interested, then they download it. And that could be a great way for you to get reviews. So those are a couple of low-cost services that I would look into. Again, knowing that it's pretty hard to do marketing without spending at least some money, but those are fairly affordable that I think that would be worth looking into.
Yeah, I actually pulled up the info on Booksprouts because I started using the Booksprout pretty recently, and I have been really happy with the results. So with Booksprout, you actually pay a per month fee. You upload your book, and then it's acting as the matchmaker between the books and the reviewers. And I think there's a certain amount of moderation they provide in the sense that if somebody is abusing the system or they are downloading their book, but they never post the review or otherwise, if people on either side are not acting in accordance with their goals, then Booksprout helps remediate that. And there's a variety of plans. So there's a plan called Growing Author, which is $9 per month. I think a lot of these are really focused around book launches. I mean, it's sort of logistically arranged to support book launches. And so I imagine you could sign up for Booksprout during the period leading up to your launch and then just suspend it and then pick it up later if you wanted to. I actually have a plan called Best-Selling Author. And the reason I picked that is that includes what's called the Endless Review Campaign. So basically what I did is I just uploaded all my books to Booksprout. They're always available for people to download. And then it's not around a book launch, which would be the other approach. That is $29 a month. So that's clearly more expensive, but, different options depending on the needs. And I've been really happy with the reviews that I've gotten as a result of making that investment.
Every review is important.
Yeah.
And you hope that the reviews that come in are good ones, right? Mm-hmm. And also something that I want to make sure we cover is that when you use these services, you're not paying for reviews.
Right.
You're paying for access to reviewers. Don't ever pay for a review. Don't ever give somebody $20 to leave a review. There's some websites out there and some people that promote. Don't do that. That's unethical. That'll get your account terminated from virtually every retailer I can think of. you never want to pay for reviews. So I just want to make sure we caveat that. But yeah, there are services out there. And if you can use these services to get a couple extra reviews even, that can make a big difference in terms of your marketing viability and you being able to say, hey, I've got 10 reviews on this book. I've got 20 reviews on this book. And yeah, it might be a lower number, but if you have, a 4.5 star average, that's a great selling point. That will help you, that will help you pour gasoline on everything else that you're doing. Yeah. Right. So you mentioned not being able to run ads, but doing other things, having more reviews and a higher review average will be very helpful for you.
Yeah. And I think that the investment there, like if you were to go with the $9 a month plan, you can blow through $9 in ads real fast, but here's something for $9, you're getting a month's worth of access to reviewers. And so it might be a better investment than putting money into ads. The other thing I wanted to add about reviews is that the reputable sites are not going to guarantee you good reviews. And so, fortunately, I've only gotten 4 and 5 star reviews on Booksprout so far, but at some point, somebody's going to read it and not like it. Actually, interestingly enough, I did have one reviewer who started a book and then returned it. I don't know what the term is in Booksprout, but they said, I'm just not getting into this. I'm taking it out of my queue, which I thought was great. Kudos to that reviewer for recognizing that was not for her and just moving on to another book, not leaving a bad review. But I also think that some people get discouraged with reviews because they start getting not 5 star reviews. They've already gotten the reviews from like their mom and their best friend, and everybody loved it was 5 stars. And if I go on to a retail platform and I see that a book has 5 reviews and they're all 5 stars, I'm just discounting that because I'm thinking, okay, well, that's just friends and family. It's not real, actual, impartial reviews. As you start getting more reviews, you're going to get some bad ones. And I think that's just social proof that these are real reviews. Now, if you're getting a lot of reviews and they're really bad, that's maybe a whole different topic for a whole different podcast episode. But don't be discouraged when you start getting a couple of 4s or a couple of 3s.
And that's the thing, is that this is a long-term investment, right? This is a long-term thing. Everybody thinks that their first book is very, very well written, but you learn. I'm going back and producing audiobook editions of a series that I wrote, probably 8 years ago. And going back and rereading the manuscript, it's like, wow, I've learned so much since then. And there are great things about the series that I love and that readers love. And that's all good, right? But I've learned so much and grown so much over the years. And so don't discount that too. With your first book or your first couple of books, you're still learning your craft. There's still a lot of things that you're moving from the unconscious talent to the conscious talent, the conscious mastery. And I think that a lot of people overestimate their abilities too. So this is not to say that everybody's a bad writer. But that's not what I'm saying at all. I think it takes an immense amount of talent and courage to publish a book. But everybody looks back on their first few books and cringes. And that's okay. It's part of the natural order of things.
Yeah, I think that can be a craft reason to invest in platforms where you will get honest reviews, because you might see those things with the first or second or third or fourth or fifth book that you say, oh, I see a theme here. I see a trend. People who are experienced in the genre are saying that there's something about this that's missing or something about it that they don't like. And that's good information to have as you improve your craft. The other thing I wanted to mention about reviews is that after talking with Stephanie Chandler in episode 221, Leveraging Your Tribe of Influence, Stephanie actually has a whole bunch of great advice about using the community you've already built up to help get outward about your books. But Stephanie told a story of how she had solicited her followers to be beta readers for a book. And Stephanie writes nonfiction. So her conversation was specific to nonfiction, but I think it's really generalizable. And she had something like 700 people say they wanted to be beta readers. And I think that she gave beta copies, advanced reader copies, to 700 people. And she said she had such a good experience, she would keep doing that, because for every copy you're giving away free to a beta reader, you are paving the way to a bunch of other readers who that reader is going to recommend your book to. And she said a bunch of those readers just bought her book when it came out as a supportive move. And so I haven't gotten 700 yet, but I have definitely opened up my willingness to share advanced reader copies with readers because I see the benefits. I did that with my last Lizzy Ballard thriller, I definitely saw the benefits. So recognizing that your target audience isn't your friends and family. And so if you ever want to expand beyond the small pond of your immediate circle, I think you kind of have to come to terms with that idea that you have to, traditional publishers give away tons and tons of copies of their books in advance of a launch because they know the benefit of doing that. And I think that's a lesson that we can learn from experienced publishers to say, we kind of have to loosen up and say, yeah, I'm going to be sharing this out free. And I have to look at it as an investment in marketing and an investment in promotion, not a loss of income because I gave away a book. Thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's kind of a common issue that people feel nervous about giving their books away or giving away, and I can understand it because you've spent how many years of your life getting that first book off the ground and building a career that you want to be proud of. I understand all of that, but you have to look at what others are doing in the space. You have to look at what publishers are doing, look at what other successful authors, specifically authors in your genre, are doing. And they wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't working, right? So
yeah.
I think you kind of have to set the ego aside a little bit and be prepared and be okay with giving away things. You don't have to give away everything. You don't have to give away your whole farm in order to build off your career, but just think of the benefits. When you do that, you're removing friction. You're making it easier for people to say, hey, I'll give this book a shot. And when they do that, you could potentially gain readers by doing that. So it's a trade-off, but I really encourage people to think about discounting their books and running sales and even giving some books away because it can serve a very beneficial purpose.
Yeah. So we've talked about some of the things that fall into what I would consider the marketing side of the marketing and promotion question from Storyverse's notes. So let's dive into promotion. So a lot of this concern was triggered by the fact that Storyverse wasn't in a position to afford ads right now. I think this is another one of those. It's kind of like the nothing is working question. There are lots of questions to delve into around, I can't afford ads. And it depends on what you consider a reasonable level of ad investment. So I'll tell my non-inspirational story, and then I'm going to ask you to comment. So for a while, and I think this is true of lots of authors, I was having great luck with Facebook ads back in, 2021, kind of in that era. And then they just tailed off. I tried a couple of different approaches to get them going again. It didn't. I just decided to stop running them because I wasn't getting the ROI and I had run out of ideas for what to try. And I started just boosting my placements on Facebook for $1 because my goal switched from selling books to just improving the chances that my followers on Facebook were actually going to see my posts. So if I put something up that I thought was especially shareable, I would boost it for $1. And I never boosted more than 1 or 2 posts a day. So a very, very, very minimal investment. And I have seen some nice increase. Again, this is an increase in engagement, not necessarily an increase in sales, because I'm not tracking through to see if that increased engagement was the reason that I was getting more sales. So I think that there is some investment you can make, but the goal is different. The goal is not achieving sales necessarily. The goal is almost improving the chances that you can keep that connection with your followers. And the fact that you have an email list is great because now you're not relying strictly on social media in order to keep that connection with your followers. Encouraging people on social media to sign up for your email list is probably a smart move, a smart marketing move, and a smart investment of maybe a couple of dollars of boosting a post on Facebook or whatever the equivalent would be on other platforms. I think the other piece of advice I would offer is don't think that money is going to solve the problem, because I still remember, this was like 2 years ago, and I still remember this moment. I was at a presentation at a large conference, and the topic was Facebook ads. And somebody asked the question, and he said, basically that he had been increasing his daily spend on Facebook ads and he was at $150 a day and he wasn't seeing any results. And
oh my.
I think I and everyone in the room just wanted to cry. So don't think that more money is going to solve the problem. Like, I know that there's kind of an underlying theme here of what can an author afford, but like, don't spend more money thinking that's going to get you over the hump. If there's something else going on there and you don't start spending $150 a day on ads until you've really got it dialed in and you can prove that you can make these things profitable. So there are a lot of other questions to ask before you would start investing more money. I don't know that I have much more to add about that because I have the funds to run ads, but I haven't hit the right strategy that's really working for me. And so I have sort of redirected my energy away from ads anyway to other ways of getting word out, like doing interviews and writing articles if I'm trying to push people to my nonfiction books, things like that. So that's kind of the situation I'm in terms of running ads specifically. Michael, what advice do you have on the ad front?
Yeah, well, if the money's not there to run the ads, then the money's not there and you have to do what you have to do. That said, I have always found that Amazon ads are pretty economical for your money. I mean, if you do a $5 a day budget, Amazon's not going to spend $5 a day. There are certain ad types where they will, but for the ads that most people are going to be using, which is the sponsored products or the automatic ads, you're not going to spend $5 a day. So I think that there is at least in part of my strategy, ads are an important part of that. But I've got things pretty dialed in. I do pretty well on my ads and conversion and all that. So, but that's a totally different topic. I think that if you can't do ads or if ads aren't working for you, then I would go back to the original advertising, which is relationships. So it will cost you nothing to look up other authors in your genre, maybe authors that are at the same level as you, maybe authors who are more successful, but look at other successful self-published authors in your genre. Get to know them. See if you can hop on a Zoom call with some folks and just talk to them. Get to know what they're working on and start to build relationships and ask if they'd be willing to facilitate a newsletter swap. So if other authors have a newsletter, ask if they would be willing to share your book. Especially we've got a book coming up in 2025. See if you can time it to where you can get 3 or 4 other authors who are further down the path than you to share your book on the week of your launch. That doesn't cost you anything. And that can have a huge impact of being able to get exposure to your brand, exposure to new readers, and get more people coming in to your books. So relationships to me is the original advertising, and that doesn't cost you a thing. Now, I know that there are going to be people who listen to this and say, oh my gosh, that makes me really nervous, right? Because we're writers. We have social anxiety, at least a lot of us, when it comes to reaching out to people and all of that. But if you can't do the advertising, what else are you going to do? And you would be surprised at how amenable other authors are to other authors that reach out. So people want to help each other. I mean, that's one of the great things about our space is that other authors really want to help each other succeed. So don't be afraid to ask for help and don't be afraid to reciprocate too, because you can expose your readers to those other authors as well. And it also gives you, gives you a break on your newsletter because I find I don't like to send newsletters all the time promoting my books. Yeah, I think that gets old. I think readers don't like that and it increases your unsubscribe rates. But it's a lot better if you can send them books that you think that they would like. Say, hey, I've got a friend here. He's got this series coming out. It's about werewolves and vampires and shifters. Oh my, I think you would love it. And share it. And readers appreciate that as opposed to buy my book, right?
Yeah, I think that is a super important message just to say overall that the way to get people to buy your book is not to say buy my book. And that regardless of what you're doing, I mean, there's sometimes when it's just you're running a BookBub ad or you're running an Amazon ad and then the ask is buy my book. But when you're actually interacting with the people that are already your fans or you want to become your fans, I mean, social media is a perfect example of this. If you have an author page and every post is buy my book, nobody's going to be following that author page very long. But if you are putting up interesting posts that are related to your book, I write some paranormal mystery. And so if I see an interesting article about, the most haunted house in Pennsylvania, then sharing those kinds of stories is interesting to people. And then when I get around periodically to say, oh, I have a book on this topic, then they're already engaged. And then they already know that we have some overlapping interest in that area. And exactly as you're saying, same with your email newsletter, you can be doing double duty by using your newsletter to promote other people. That creates all sorts of good feeling, and good feeling usually results in good things happening. So follow on.
Yeah. And you build those relationships, and you can do it online. You can do it on social media. You can do it by looking at all of the different writing and related events that are in your town. So is there an author event that's in your town, right? What if you registered for that? Or that's how you can meet people. That's how you can start to strike up those relationships and get to know folks. And just don't be afraid to ask.
Yeah. And genre-specific writers groups, I think, is always great benefit, not only for getting word out about your books, but for all sorts of reasons. So if you can find those people, then they can often become your most enthusiastic supporters. You had mentioned about free resources. So since obviously availability of money is a consideration for every indie author, you had said that you had some free or low-cost resources related to book marketing and promotion. Do you want to share some of those?
Yeah, and they're more alternatives, not so much resources. But as I said before, relationships, that doesn't cost you anything, right? Being able to build relationships with people, that costs you nothing. Another great thing to do is, again, if you feel like your sales are not where they are, there are some things that you can do that you can change with your book, right? So take a look at the back matter of your book. What does that look like when readers get to the end of the book? And it can change depending on what your goals are. Are you trying to get reviews? Are you sending people toward the next book in your series? When you publish that next book, make sure you update the back matter in that first book so that you can send people to the next book, assuming it's a series. If it's not, I still probably would still consider sending people to it, assuming you're writing in the same genre. So your back matter, take a look at that. It doesn't cost you anything to update your book description. Often, you can improve your sales by updating your book description. So everybody here, whether you choose to use it or not, you could use ChatGPT or Claude to help you improve your book descriptions. That is certainly an alternative. Taking a look at the pricing of your book, making sure you're in that sweet spot, at least on Amazon, between $2.99 and $9.99, right? Probably around $4.99 is probably going to be where you want to be. So take a look at your pricing. Sometimes it doesn't happen that often, but sometimes I see people that have their books priced way, like, what are you thinking, right? They're priced at like $14.99 on Amazon or something like that, which makes no sense at all. And whether you like it or not, again, that's just how things are right now in terms of the pricing structures. You're going to make the best royalty at between $2.99 and $9.99, and anything above or below that, below that would be a discount price. Above that, you really have to have some good reasons for going above $9.99 on Amazon. But maybe you charge a little bit more on other sites like Kobo or other places where people buy books. So looking at your pricing strategy, I also think is important. Typically, as you drop your prices, you will increase your sales, but I probably wouldn't drop my prices that much. I wouldn't price your book at like $1.99. And if you've got a full book, unless you've got a series, and then again, this is where pricing can be helpful. If you've got a series, so say a 3-book series, you may want to price the first book a little bit lower. So what I typically do is, if it's a front list series, so if it's a series I'm actively writing and it's a series that I'm heavily promoting, the first book in the series is usually like, I think it's $3.99. Mm-hmm. And then every book after that is $4.99. So by dropping the price of book one, it helps to get people more likely to purchase the first book in the series. And then I make that money back over the full series as people buy it. Backlist series, I will do, I usually will have, once the series is complete and I've moved on, I will usually drop the price of the first book down to $2.99. And then every subsequent book is $3.99. And there are also other choices, other things you can do with bundling, and you could create an omnibus for your books. But again, that's long-term down the road when you have more books, but it doesn't cost you anything to evaluate your pricing strategy, right? Yeah. So those are, in terms of low cost, free things that you can do. Those are things that anyone can do right now. And I would be willing to bet that there's really, there's no, there's no I mean, unless your book is selling like gangbusters, there's probably no book description that can't be improved in some form or fashion. And on Amazon, that could also include A+ content. So using tools like Canva to create A+ content, BookBrush, that's a paid tool, but that's an option as well to improve the visibility and the marketability of your sales pages. So I just threw a lot at you, but those are just some of the things that you can do that don't have to cost anything.
Yeah, I have an approach to my pricing, which is very similar to yours. My first in series is $3.99. The subsequent ones are $6.99. I raised it to $6.99 from $4.99 earlier this year. And I think that just as there's a danger of pricing it too high, there's also a danger of pricing it too low. And I think that an approach I wouldn't recommend authors take is just to cut their price in the hopes that eventually they're going to get it low enough that people will buy it. I actually have just decided that I'm going to experiment with when I discount my books, I'm going to discount them to $2.99 because I'm seeing that on a lot of the platforms like BookBub now. It used to be like all the books were either free or 99 cents. But now a lot of the books that are even being advertised as discounted on BookBub are at $1.99 or $2.99. And that's great because you're getting the full 70% royalties, and yet my books are priced high enough so that a $2.99 price does represent a discount to people. So playing around with pricing exactly as you're saying is great. Another thing that I thought of as we were talking about reviews is that I do a little bit of book formatting for someone who has thousands and thousands of enthusiastic reviews on the biggest retail site. And before I realized that, and I was working on the format for his book, he had the chapter ended, it said end, and then right after that on the same page was a request for reviews. If you enjoyed this book, please consider going on your favorite online retail platform and leaving a review. It's a great help to me as an indie author. And I said, well, do you want to have a page break? Because as a reader, I kind of want to like sit in the story for a moment, still be in the world and not be kind of taken out of the world with the request for a review. And then he said, well, yeah, but I have thousands and thousands of happy reviews on Amazon. I was like, oh yeah, you're right. Okay, let's not change that. And so that's something you can do just formatting wise, like be very upfront about if you enjoyed this story, I would love it if you would leave a review and make sure people are seeing that on that page. And I changed my policy. I have my review request right after the end of the last chapter because I finally just decided that I wasn't going to stay on my high horse about that if it paved the way to review. So even very simple things like how you're formatting your books can help that sort of thing.
Oh, absolutely.
So the other thing you were talking also about deciding how to price your books. And one of the things that I think is really important that I actually don't hear people recommending to authors too much is to take a look at your book as the shopper on an online platform would see it, both with the books that you would like it to appear with and the books it's actually appearing with. So on a lot of sites you'll go on, if you pull your book up, you'll see other books like this. You know, if you like this book, consider these books. And I think it's really important to look through those and say, is my price in line with what I'm seeing there? Is my cover in line with what I'm seeing there? Is the sort of quick glance quality of what I have to offer in line with what I'm seeing there? And is what I'm seeing there what I want to see there? And so if you're thinking of yourself as literary fiction and you're hoping that you might consider are other literary fiction books, but they turn out to be romance, then there's a disconnect between what you think you're offering and what readers are perceiving you're offering. So I think it's often helpful to just step back and look across how the retail platforms are seeing your book and who they're presenting it to and say, is that the company I want to be in? Are those the readers I'm trying to appeal to?
Yep, agree 100%.
So we've been talking about some kind of marketing approaches people can use. If money is tight, do you have any other recommendations for promotional opportunities?
Those are the big ones. Another thing to think about is running a Kickstarter. So I know Kickstarter makes some people break into a cold sweat, but if you're going to produce the book anyway, then why not try to crowdfund it and look at what other successful authors are doing in your genre, run a Kickstarter, and that might help. Also, Kickstarter is starting to become a book discovery site as well.
Yeah.
So people are going to Kickstarter to buy books and to look for books. So that way has been paved, and that's something you should definitely take a look at. And you might be surprised at what you can accomplish. Now, Kickstarter is, I call Kickstarters like the full body workout of marketing, because you pretty much have to be firing on all cylinders to get them to be successful. You've got to be good at copywriting. You've got to be able to put compelling images together. You've got to be able to sell your book. You've got to be able, in some cases, to put together a quick video. I mean, pretty much any marketing skill you can think of, you have to be able to do it with a Kickstarter. And it could be a good learning opportunity too, if anything else. Even if you fail, you will learn a lot about your marketing style with Kickstarters as well.
Yeah, the episode I can recommend there is episode 230, The Good, the Bad, and the Surprising of Kickstarter with Megan Haskell and Jennifer Hill. And I think that also brings us back to the question of the goal, because I'm reading into this. There are two possible reasons that somebody could be going for sales. One is to earn money, and one is to know that their book is getting into readers' hands. If it's the first one, if money is what you're focused on, then things like Kickstarter, like if the reason you're looking to earn money is because you need it to fund upcoming books, then Kickstarter can be a way to do that, because you can use the money that you earn from the Kickstarter in order to fund the books. If you're looking to make sales and you're needing to economize because you're not having sales, and again, the financial side is what's driving it, then always search for free tools first when you're trying to do some of these things. Like BookBrush is a subscription service. But if what you're looking for is mock-ups, here's a picture of my print book and my audiobook and my ebook in a nice format, then you can go to something like DIYcovers.com, I think is what it is. And you can get a very basic mock-up of your book in print that you could then put over a free picture from Unsplash in order to make a Facebook ad or something like that. So always explore what's available for free. And a lot of these tools also have free options. Eventually, they'll ask you to pay if you decide you want to up your use of the tool. But if money's what the driver is there, then see what's available for free out there before you start making the investments in some of these promotion marketing tools.
Yeah, you can always scale up. Yeah, you can but it becomes harder once you start using paid tools. It becomes harder to go back to free. So only do the paid when you're ready to make that jump, or you're ready to take the investment.
Yeah, I think that there are lots and lots of tools out there that are just doing a prettier version of what you can achieve in a Google Sheet or a Google Doc. If you're willing to invest a little more time and look at something that isn't quite so pretty, you can save some money there. We'll have to have a whole other conversation about publishing tips for frugal authors, which is something I enjoy talking about. So, Michael, any final thoughts on advice we might have for Storyverse that might help her get unstuck when it feels like nothing is working?
Yeah, be kind to yourself. There are very few authors I know who knock this out of the park overnight. It takes multiple books. It takes a lot of perseverance and courage and willingness to think outside the box. And you're going to make some missteps, and you're going to make some failures, and that's okay. It's part of the process. And I think it was Jim Krukel had said that he's an 18-year overnight success story.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's true for a lot of people. There's things you're going to learn with your craft, things you're going to learn about marketing, things you're going to learn about business. And as time goes on and you do it more, because I think publishing more books is critical, because that's going to help you learn and pour gasoline and accelerate your learning. Okay? Yeah. And you'll get there. And just keep taking the lessons that you learn and apply them to the next book. And I think that is ultimately the best advice I can give.
That's great. Well, Michael, it is always fabulous talking to you, and I appreciate you sharing your thoughts on getting unstuck. So please let everyone know where they can find out more about you and everything you do online.
If you'd like to check out my fiction, you can find me at michaelleron.com. And if you're interested in any of the things that I have to offer for writers, you can find me at authorlevelup.com, including my YouTube channel.
Great. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Michael. What strategies have you found effective for getting your books noticed without breaking the bank? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Just leave a comment on YouTube. I also wanted to mention one other recommended resource, Booksprout, which I'm using very successfully to match my books up to the people who love those genres and are enthusiastic about sharing their reactions with other readers on online retail and review platforms. And if you want to explore Booksprout, I'd love it if you would use my affiliate link. You can just go to theindyauthor.com/affiliates. Until next time, here's wishing you favorable winds and smooth sailing on your creative voyage.